You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 616. This is our final Cassian Andor, let's just call it, our final Andor Spotlight show on the man himself, Cassian Andor. We've saved the best for last, someone that I know Jonesy and I both have really, really come to enjoy. We're going to explore all that and so much more, and to help me do that, of course, is none other than himself, Jonesy. Jonesy, welcome to the show. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, man. It's good to finally officially wrap up our Andor Season 2 coverage. Although a little sad at the same time, but no, excited to be able to finally talk about Cassian. I mean, he's interwoven through all of the other characters, so we've touched on him in a lot of different ways already, but it would be good to do just this kind of deeper dive into him and see what we actually learned.
Yeah. Well, before we get started, how about some shout outs and some thank yous to very special people?
Yeah, special thanks to all of our now part of the tribe members over on Patreon: Alex, Danny, Dante, Daz, I've got a Brad feeling, Jackson, Jacob, Josh, Mike, Wrist, Sharkman Dan, and Uncle Leon. Delusions Granny members, our top tier. Now, this is Rod Racing, CJ, Steve, and Rob. Again, thank you all so much. CantinaCast.com/Patreon if you are curious about joining us, whether it's an audio stream or a live stream. We appreciate you being around. And for those out in the live stream tonight, CantinaCast.com/YouTube if you're listening. We'd love for you to come out and join us. And Qui-Gon J, One Up versus EPU, Alex, we see you folks out there in the background too. So we hope you'll come out and say hello. We'd love to hear from you. Put your thoughts up on screen. Share some of your thoughts, comments, questions about Cassian Andor as we finally wrap up our Andor coverage for a while at least. I'm sure we'll do a 1 year later season 2 type of thing at some point. But
we will.
Yeah, but at least for now. So we got to throw them out there, and we'll get to as many as we can tonight.
And speaking of which, we do have I don't know if we penciled it in, but a 1 year later on the Acolyte. Did we do that yet already?
Yeah, we already did that, man.
Okay, well, we'll do 1 year and 3 months later on the Acolyte. Now, we've got Rebuild the Galaxy coming up here very shortly, I think next week sometime. So that's coming up. We'll be taking a look at that first one. And, of course, the second one's soon to air. So we'll break that one down as well.
I keep preaching it, man. If you folks kind of laughing at us for doing like coverage of a Lego Star Wars show, but it's worth your time. Please go watch it. Watch it ahead of time with us. Some others who have done it have actually really enjoyed it. So join Albert on this journey of Lego Star Wars.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen
prepare to be impressed.
Yeah, no, I mean, they've done a pretty good job with all the other ones. Like, I like the holiday specials and some of the other stuff too. So I have no reason to think this isn't going to be bad, and I'm sure it's not. But I just haven't gotten around to it, in the priority of things. But I'm looking forward to kind of letting loose and just having some fun with that show.
Yeah, whenever CP said in the chat, they have Revan in season 2. There's a whole lot of characters. I think Ahsoka is like the Lego block. If you remember some of those that have come out, I think they had a Mando and Grogu one too, but like the stocky block.
Right, yeah.
I think that's how she's coming back. So you'll see coverage of that, of how they work this all in. You have Darth Jar Jar in Rebuild the Galaxy season 1. Yeah, so a lot of people get excited about those types of things that we've always joked about that kind of make their way in and as tongue-in-cheek humor, but actually are pretty well done and a lot of fun. So we hope you'll join us for that, and hope you'll actually watch that ahead of time too, because it's worth your time. It's just a good time.
All right. Well, speaking of good times, let's get this good time rolling and talk about Cassian Andor himself. And I want to start with Diego Luna, the character of Andor. I think Qui-Gon J had already said it. This is it touches on what I wanted to open up with, was how many people were more important to the cause in Cassian Andor, because I think there's a lot to be said now, especially with so much backstory coming out around how the Death Star plans got into the hands of the rebels. And, it used to be pretty straightforward. I mean, from the crawl, it was, Leia delivered them and she got all the credit for it. And now it's like, no, there were a lot of things that went into that. Not to discredit Leia. She certainly had her role and she had her play, but this was kind of like a team effort. And there were a lot of players that, were a part of this that were never spoken about. And I'm speaking of this knowing very well that all this is all kind of retcon and done well after we had got past the original trilogy. But nonetheless, you've got somebody like Cassian Andor, You've got people like Mon Mothma. You've got Jyn Erso, right? There's a whole cast of characters out there now that have really had a big say. And any point in one of these journeys for these characters, if something didn't go right, none of this happens. You know what I mean? Like, it's just everything had to align. And maybe that was the Force talking. But when you look at Cassian Andor now and you put him up against the ranks of like the big players like Leia and Luke and everybody that had a hand in, you know, the downfall of the Empire, you know, where do you rank him now that we've seen kind of, you know, his backstory for the most part?
Well, where do you rank him? I mean, that's like you said, it's such an ensemble.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how you pick who is most important and who is least important and all of that, because you have so many that are just so vital for so long. I mean, Luthen, of course, has to start to surface towards the top of that list, or, you know, the guy who kind of got it started in some respects, but not all respects. And
Right.
you know, Cassian, definitely what he did, especially in Rogue One. I mean, and again, protecting Mon Mothma. There's so many small things; they all add up so, you know, to great things. And, you know, pinpointing one and saying where they rank, I don't know if I could do it, to be honest with you, because I just don't. I don't know how you pinpoint each individual person. It's a long conversation. I think we'd have to actually have a cast of characters specifically named and how we want to rank them in there. We probably could. I just don't want to, because I think it just cheapens it a little bit. They all had their a really important part to play. And I
Well,
like that.
let me
Yeah.
hold on. So
Yeah.
take away the ranking thing, because I didn't mean it to be literal,
Oh,
but in
okay.
terms of like talking about like the big players around, you know, does he deserve to be in that same conversation with
Oh,
the
sure.
Lukes and the Leias and all that? That's kind of where I was going.
Yeah, I think so. I think, and again, I was about to get to this point too, because I think it's relevant. The ensemble cast of Andor accentuates how important each individual is to a greater cause.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you need each and every one of them, because without them, there are certain things, like you said, they just don't happen. And without certain players, things break down further downstream of that. So without Mon Mothma, things break down. If Cassian wasn't doing some of the things for Luthen, who knows if they get this far in the first place?
Yep.
So you can't really take one out of the equation. Maybe sometimes other people would step in, especially if you're a believer that the Force, this is all of the will of the Force in some kind of way.
Yeah. Yeah.
But at the same time, you can see how difficult that would be over time to be able to do that. And I think that's what the show did so great. It just showed you each piece really does matter in its own way, even if it's small and seemingly insignificant in a given moment.
Yep.
And I think characters like Cassian show you that they can kind of rise, you know, a little bit to the top of that. I hesitate to call him a leader in some ways, although the more I thought about it, I think there's some examples. But, you know, I think overall, though, you still have to appreciate a character like Cassian and why they put him front and center. And I think it still works for him to kind of be front and center on it, because everything kind of moves in and out of him in some kind of way. He's kind of a hub. Him and Luthen are kind of a hub and a spoke in the wheel.
Yeah. No, and I agree with all of it. I mean, it's kind of a softball question, because I think you'd be hard pressed to find anybody that doesn't feel like Cassian Andor deserves to be in that conversation. We talk about who are the big players in Star Wars, and certainly the downfall of the Empire. I mean, a lot of that is the character itself. A lot of that is Gilroy fleshing that out, you know, but you got to put a lot of that at the feet of Diego Luna and his portrayal of the character. You know, I don't want to get on the soapbox, because I've been on it many times. It's not really soapbox. It's more of a monologue. But, you know, seeing somebody of Hispanic descent, you know, on screen for me was hugely important. It was important for my father. It was important for a number of my other family members as well. Not that it changed anything. We all love Star Wars. And I mean, I love Star Wars as much as the next crazy ass person, because I'm doing this podcast and for so long, right? But at the same time, growing up and not seeing somebody like that, not having that representation. If you don't understand representation, I just want to say this too. If you don't understand representation, that's totally fine. Like no one should be like knocking you for that. And you guys, like, I don't get it. It's just take us for granted, or take people at their face value when they say that. Look, it is important. It is important to see something like that. And so when Diego Luna was cast, I think you and I had that conversation. I was elated. I went to see him when he was in Havana Nights, and that was like a long time ago. I have the ticket stub back here, and I was excited to see him because I had seen him in I don't know if that one was before what's it called? Tu Mama También or whatever. I can't forget which one was first, but I was a big fan of his just because he was, you know, a really good actor from what I could tell. And he was super young at the time. I think he was in his 20s or maybe even younger. And so I've been a fan of his for a very, very long time. I never thought that we would see a Hispanic person or, on screen in Star Wars. And so it was a big deal to have him. And then just to put that aside, right? Okay, now let's remove the color of his skin. He's an amazing actor. Like the what he delivers in Rogue One is arguably more powerful than some of the stuff in Andor. Like I went back, watched Rogue One, and just that last speech that he gives to Jyn Erso when he's telling her that I believe you, right? I want to touch on that here in a little bit, but he's such a powerful actor, very potent actor, and he does so much with so little. And he's very genuine. He's like the perfect person to have played Andor. And as far as where he is, I think he is. Yeah, he's definitely part of that conversation. You could argue that without him, this doesn't happen unless you believe in the will of the Force, and it was going to happen at some point. But I mean, just a great character, and I think we're so blessed to finally have somebody that came out after so long. I mean, I don't know. I mean, outside of like Ahsoka and some of the characters that had a long time to develop, I was starting to think of like, is there a character that I feel has come out since the Disney era that I'm just like, wow, this is an incredible, deep character outside of the characters from Andor, right? Because we talked about Mon Mothma. I think she's in that conversation as well. Andor's in that conversation. But as much as I love the sequel trilogy, I didn't connect with the sequel trilogy characters as much. And some of that is because of the way they were written and the stories that were being told versus what we were getting here. Maybe it's it's because of the times that we live in that this is more relevant and certainly connects with me. But Andor is one of those characters that in a very short amount of time, all things considered, he really kind of rose up to be a very character that's forefront in my mind when I think of like the, I don't know, the champions of Star Wars, if you will.
Yeah, I think the cast of Rogue One continue to kind of ascend in that way. And I think it shows like Andor to help. I agree. I don't think there's any other piece of content that in the last 10 years, I mean, that Rogue One was 2016, right? So right at 10 years now, that has been able to really grow and expand as much as this has. I think Ahsoka has kind of attempted that. They've done it in some ways, but maybe not as successfully. And again, they've done it over a variety of things. Now, we created the Mandoverse and things like that. So there's a lot of argument, but I think from what connects with people at a deeper level and actually kind of represents our historical culture, not necessarily just what's happening now in real life, but kind of what we see over time and that we can really grab onto and understand and internalize. And again, the characters, as you so well put, bringing them to life. I think the Andor and Rogue One series have kind of taken that to just a whole nother level. It's really difficult to argue that it's become the cream of the crop for Star Wars in particular.
So let's talk about maybe defining traits.
It has been rewarded with awards, of course, too.
Oh, yeah. I mean, as of this recording, two major things have happened. One, and I say major, it was kind of a given, but they won, what was it, best set design and best costuming, right? Those two awards have been got. And the second thing, the big thing that happened was the funding for the gunship went through for the HasLab stuff. So, but that's another conversation. So congratulations, Rob, everybody else that had their pre-orders in. I think Dale as well, Dale Skywalker, he got his in as well too. So congratulations on that front. Okay. That's aside. Let's talk about some of, I guess, his defining characteristics. He's pretty consistent between Rogue One and Andor. I think because we saw, well, maybe not season 1 of Andor. We got to see some development. By the time we get to season 2, he's pretty, especially after year 1 or the first year of season 2, he's really starting to lean into the character that we get in Rogue One. So kudos to them for kind of doing that. I still feel like there are pieces missing, and we'll touch on that here, hopefully, as we kind of traverse through some of these questions. But I mean, his loyalty is boundless. Like, he's very, very loyal to the people that he serves. I don't know that he gets that in return, though. Like, he doesn't, like, and I also had trustworthy on here. Like, everybody seems to trust him. If they need something done, if they need Mon Mothma escorted out of the Senate under Imperial rule, they're going to send one person. Right. And it's going to be Andor, and they trust him that much to do it. At the same time, he can be a little bit maverick, and he can be somebody who, will buck against the system. And so, break the rules, if you will. And so there's kind of a give and take there. But I think when they know, something this important and critical is on the line, they're going to send him. And I see them as, they see him as trustworthy, but I think he trusts other people too. Maybe sometimes a little too much. I also had him written down as a savior. I forget who it was. I think it was it Vel who said that you're always trying to save people, or was it Clea? I forget. One of them says that.
Yeah, I remember Clea was like, "Of course it would be you."
Yeah, and there's other examples. We don't want to run through them, but there's so many examples in this series that he is always trying to save people, right? And so, he's definitely in that category. Inspiring. What's her name? Naya, the girl at the very beginning of season 2.
Right.
That was he was instilling trust in her, saying, "Look, you're coming home," giving her that hope, giving her that confidence. We'll touch on hope more a little bit too, as well. And then the other word that I had written down here, and I swear I'm not saying this because I think he's force sensitive, but I do feel like he even says it himself. He said he's very lucky, right? And it always goes back to the Kenobi quote of, "In my experience, there's no such thing as luck." And this is an interesting topic. We don't need to break it down here. If we want to, you can talk a little bit more about it. But even though I truly, in my hearts of hearts, believe that he is not force sensitive, he does feel like he has been a tool or a
He's
what's
chosen.
the word? Yeah, chosen, if you will, by the Force itself, right? An avatar of the Force. Something, he's out there doing the will of the Force, even though he may not be force sensitive. Something is guiding him, and I think that's why the Force healer was able to pick up on it. That's why she said that he was meant to be there, meant to be with, Jin and all that stuff. As the messenger. I mean, there's just something there, even though, again, I don't think he's force sensitive. I think he's being driven and working as a tool or an avatar or whatever you want to call that. But so those are some of the characteristics, and I think that spoke to me. But what about you?
Yeah, on that front, I had calling or chosen in kind of quotes. So I was there with you. I think instrument of the Force, if you will, or something along those lines.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to think of the word, but yeah, it's probably a better word.
Some of the ones that I had that maybe you didn't have were pragmatic. I think we saw that especially in season 2, less emotional, more pragmatic.
Yeah.
Committed, decisive. Whenever he makes a decision, he's doing it. We saw a lot of self-doubt in season 1. That was a nice evolution there.
Mm-hmm.
Highly compartmentalized as well. He's able to really segment things throughout season 2 to departmentalize them, but also until it comes to Bix. I think she's the one kind of loose end.
Right, everything goes out.
With him, which we talked with the Bix spotlight as well, right? That's a bit of a challenge. He's still self-interested mostly, so kind of in parentheses mostly, but still has a lot of that self-interest about what is it that he thinks is best in that moment. And I think loyalty that you put, I think, is definitely a kind of a joining idea with that too. So I think that drives some of his self-interest. He's resistant, I think, to that higher calling. So you could definitely feel like he's always just kind of resisting that it's there. Rebel, rogue, those are kind of typical ones.
Yeah.
And then in more situational terms, I had charismatic and inspirational as well, because he can be, but sometimes it almost comes off as a used car salesman. But at the same time, you definitely, like the speech you referenced with Naya up in episode 1 of season 2, I think you can also start to feel like when he actually means it. Yeah. And that he starts speaking from the heart, and people do gravitate towards that, and they do value that, and they need that. And Cassian, I don't think he knows that he's doing it necessarily. I think there's sometimes where he kind of does, but then he gets into it and he just starts speaking from the heart. And I think that's what makes him so powerful and so dangerous to the Empire, because those are the things that start to really show other people what's possible and what they can truly achieve, and why they're fighting and what they're fighting for, and why it's important. So I think that's why characters like Andor are very important, because even in small individual things, it helps inspire other people to do small individual things that add up and snowball.
Yeah. He's definitely one of those. Influencer is such a bad word these days because we associate it to like social media now. But there was a time before social media where influencer were the people that made great leaders, right? And that's kind of where we'll get to here in just a little bit. But before we get into kind of his role in the rebellion and leadership, what about his transition from Rogue One to Andor, or I should say Andor to Rogue One? I felt like it was a pretty good transition. I feel like he definitely, became more of the character. Like I said, more of the character by the, after the first episode of season 2. Certainly hints of him becoming that in season 1, but did come across as, he starts off as, he's pulled into the rebellion already, even though he doesn't, even if he may not admit it, right? He makes that quote about, some of us have been fighting this since we were 5-6 years old or whatever it is. But he's lived this life of just a loss to the Empire, right? He lost his sister to the Empire. He loses Clem. He loses Marva. Later down the road, he loses Brasso, people that he worked with like Luthen. arguably the town of Ferrix, suddenly was under siege and completely taken over by the Empire. So he's had this life of constantly living under the fear and of the oppression of the Empire. But at the same time, when you see him in season 1, he's just kind of like he's just, getting into a lot of trouble. He's got a reputation about going out there, getting in trouble, and he's just kind of living day by day, week by week, seeing where the wind takes him. And it really isn't until, that he comes into contact with like Luthen and all that suddenly his whole destiny completely changes. And it is kind of neat to see him. Like, we actually see him laughing and smiling in the very first episode, and we don't see him laugh or smile again until whatever, I think it was like the second to last episode when they're playing poker.
Right.
But, and it's just like, he's gone from this, there was almost a bit of innocence that came with him in season 1 that I think he did a really good job of portraying. Like, oh, this whole world is out there, this whole galaxy is out there, and I'm not a part of it. I don't know anything about it. And suddenly he's just like, look, take me. I'm your vessel, right? Do what you need to do with me. I'm yours at this point, because he lost so much. So it was interesting to see him kind of move into that. We can segue into like the discussion about, did we see him evolve into a true leader by season 2? I think there are examples that he was a leader, but I think the way that season was kind of split up, I bet you there was probably more examples where they were more concrete, very much in your face examples of him showing leadership skills. I don't know that we really got that. We have to just assume he is, because when we get to Rogue One, like if you think about season 2, he's not in a leadership position per se. He's on these little quick missions where it's either him by himself or he's got, maybe 2 people with him, and that's about it. When you get to Rogue One and he delivers that speech, he turns around, he's got this army of people that are ready to go with him to go fight the Empire, which is really cool. And it's very dramatic. But you're like, wait, where the hell were all these people? Like, we didn't see any of that in Andor season 1 or season 2, not to that level, I guess is what I'm saying. So that was an interesting evolution that happened, or maybe a jump when we talk about the transition from Rogue One to Andor. So any thoughts around, I guess, how his character developed and some of the things that you saw him transition to as his character went on through the years there?
Yeah, we see the evolution from a lost soul and someone without purpose. I think that's the part that we really started to see concrete with, or really become more concrete with Andor, was just that sense of purpose, and that there is something to fight for, and there's a way to fight for it. And what I like, it was more subtle in I think the transition between season 1 and season 2, because when we pick up at season 2, he's kind of already left Luthen in some ways. He's kind of helping him on a little bit. They're starting to have that rub, and he breaks at some point, and he's finally understanding what it is, like how is his way of pushing back and fighting on this. And I think when we think about where he was going, maybe from more of a leadership standpoint, it's when he decides to shore up with the rebellion rather than continue to fight it the way that Luthen has been fighting it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And Luthen's way of fighting it, while controversial in many ways, is still vital, because that really dirty work and more localized work is what's going to feed them the information for the Death Star. And you get little bits of information like that. That's still that old spy network type of way of doing it, rather than like kind of a big organized front. But you need both, right? You've got to have one to feed the other. It's the same with the Bothans when it comes to Return of the Jedi, right? You need these smaller cells to be able to do some of this stuff. But I think with Andor, he started to see that he can actually inspire others by just doing what he does. People want to be associated with people who do great things. And I think when you change the perspective and just shift it slightly like that, now it could be very dangerous if you're out there running rogue like he is. But I think when you ask the question of like, well, how do all these people just kind of show up for him in Rogue One? Well, they've been watching what he's been doing. They watch what do you stand for? What is it what means the most to you? What's important to you? Protecting people who you feel are vital, protecting people you consider family, and taking risks to do that is what the rebellion is kind of built on at its most fundamental level, because those are the things that the Empire is stripped away from everybody. And so I think when other people watch that and see that, they start to believe in those individuals of like, I would follow, if they needed me, I would raise my hand. Mm-hmm. Right. We kind of hear people like that too. Hey, if that person ever does something in the company, I want to be on that team, or I want to be able to do that. I just kind of see it from afar, but I would really like to be on that team. I think that's where Cassian, for as many times as he's rubbed people the wrong way, maybe rubbed leadership the wrong way, those are the types of activities he does inspire that people want to be able to, help and be associated with that. And he can then kind of pick what makes the most sense to be successful in some of that. So I think we start to see that evolve in season 2, though. I think definitely from the Lost Soul we saw in season 1, where he just needed some direction. He kept losing everything. He didn't know what to do with it. He didn't understand what Luthen was really trying to teach him, of like, try to really zero this in, hone your skills, hone the damage you can do, and then let's move forward and let's evolve from some of that too. And so while very individual in nature, I think you could see where he's inspiring others to do more as well.
Yeah. Yeah. He's one of those leaders too that, definitely led by example. I mean, I think people were well aware of what he was doing or seeing the success of his missions. And so therefore they probably were inspired to like, hey, let's rally around this guy, especially there at the very end when it felt like all hope was lost. No pun intended there.
Well, and also that allegiance too, right? I mean, it may not have been as overt, right, with Luthen as it was when he was giving the speech to the council, there on Yavin. But by bringing Clea in and by not abandoning those old relationships, even though they become strained, or maybe they become strained to their organizational objectives and maybe their ideals and how they go about doing it, but still valuing that and being able to stand up for what he believes is right and what they represented in the process of going through that, I think is also, people see that and they respect that. And when you respect someone, you will inspire greatness in others at the same time.
I think his decision to join the rebellion, like both feet in, it makes sense. Like it goes back to the pragmatism that you were talking about, because, and if you take the 3 characters of Luthen, Andor, and Saw Gerrera, you've got Saw Gerrera, who doesn't trust anyone. Right? They're all in it for the same thing, right? They want to bring down the Empire. Saw Gerrera trusts no one, yet he still aligns himself with people, but at any given moment, they could just die and he may kill them because he doesn't trust them. He's going crazy and all that. So that's like pure chaos over there in that corner. Then you've got somebody like Luthen, who trusts his inner circle better than Saw Gerrera does, but he's not willing to put himself out there and trust the greater good, like the greater galaxy. You know what I mean? Like he still keeps his arms distance. And so that probably rubbed people the wrong way. And you've got Cassian Andor, who's sitting there thinking, okay, I can't really join this guy because that's a lost cause. I don't want to join this guy because he realizes that, look, even though, we're like sticking it to them and, taking money and blowing up buildings and all that, it's safety in numbers. Like we just don't have enough people. Like there's got to be a group. We've got to start coming together. I mean, he sees the vision of at some point, we can't just be a cell of terrorists. We actually have to be an army, right? We have to be a rebellion of sorts. And so, that's why I think he finally fits in and aligns with that. And I think Will was kind of in that same boat where he was probably jumping around to, trying to decide on where he wanted to end up. I think ultimately it was Cassian Andor who convinced him, like, you can go hang out with Saw Gerrera all you want, and that's a lot of fun, and you get to blow a lot of stuff up, but we're not really winning the war here. And so I think he's the one that eventually pulls him over, because we never got that either, right? In my head canon, it was Cassian who went and said, look, dude, you need to come back over to this side and really stay with us at this point.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, when you think about it, he could have gone any direction. Cassian, Wilma, and a variety of characters. They had every opportunity to go, and you'd be justified in saying of whichever one he picked. But I think it's a testament to him. You kind of see this on Gorman too, when he assesses them like, hey, they're not ready. They can't do this. Like the odds are stacked against them. This doesn't feel good. So he's not willing to he's kind of become a little bit risk averse. Mm-hmm. Oddly enough, he's trying to be over perfect. And I think Luton actually talks about that. The time for perfect is done when he's meeting up with Lonnie at the very end. But I think at the end of the day, that pragmatism, like you were talking about of Andor or Cassian, is that he's like, okay, what do I want this to be after the fact? What do I want this to be whenever I finally do link back up with Bix? Like something has got to take over. I don't know. I think he wasn't under any kind of preconceived notion that he was going to survive all of this, right? I think he probably knew the odds were against him from living. But if I do, and for everybody else that I'm trying to do this for, I have to be part of the organization that's actually going to make the most of it.
Yep.
Once we win, not if we win, but once we win, and have that firm belief. And the rebellion was that shot, right? The right balance and mix of what does government look like, what should it maybe look like, as well as how do we get there from a militaristic standpoint. And this is our best shot, because the other ones are just you'll chip away over time, but really it's a war of attrition. Mm-hmm. And you're likely not going to win that, or you're just going to drag it out for ever, and we've seen this in many pockets of the world, in real life, where these battles just never kind of come. There's no conclusion to them. They may subside for a while, then they heat back up, but the tension is always there. And in the end, has anything really dramatically changed? And you could argue, sometimes no. And I think that's what meant something to Cassian. Like, we have to truly make meaningful, lasting change, and we've got to be able to do it like throughout the process, not just the war part.
Yeah. So we talked about his leadership role. I want to talk about the messenger, because he's listed as the messenger. I think it's important to point out that in Rogue One, he tells Jyn Erso, "You're the messenger," right? About delivering the message that she got from her father. And so it's interesting that Tony Gilroy would pick that up and call Cassian the messenger. We heard that from the Force healer as well. But when you hear that, I guess, what are some of the things, like, what was he a messenger of? And I've seen a lot of different interpretations. I've got a few myself that I like, but what was it, a literal thing? Do you think there was more meaning in that? What's your take on that?
Yeah, to be truthful with you, I really didn't really understand it all that well.
Yeah.
To understand what is he truly the messenger of. So I'd love to get your thoughts on it. Maybe it'll inspire something of a response. But this is one where I'm a little bit challenged to actually come up with what is he messaging across? Like, from what perspective? You could kind of look at this from a few things, but maybe you could share some of yours up front.
Yes. Well, see, Jonesy, there is a thing called from a certain point of view, and we're going to stay on that little box for a little bit here. I think so. You can take this a couple of different ways, and feel free to chime in or let us know if you agree, disagree, if you got a different take. But I think first and foremost, the literal sense is him as a messenger. No, him as a delivering the message of the plans. Right. There's a point in Rogue One when they say that the message was sent, right, and that message had the plans in it. I think when at the very, very end of it all. And so that is the more literal sense. It's probably the one that's really on the nose, that he was the messenger of this message that had a Death Star plan. I don't know what you would have called it, because if you didn't call it a message, then he would have been the Death Star plan sender, which doesn't really make any sense, right? So I get what he was doing there. But I think also he was kind of a messenger of hope in a lot of ways, right? He was always inspiring people. We talked earlier about, what's her name, Naya, in that first episode of season 2. He was kind of delivering the message of, you're coming home, right? Inspiring people in that way. I think there's a couple times during season 1 and season 2 where things happened and people told him, "Hey, you need to tell what exactly happened here." After Narkia 5 went down, I think it was Melshi said, "Spread the word of what happened here," right? So he's spreading the word. He's the messenger. Later on, when we get to Gorman, there's someone that says, you need to tell the people what happened here as well. Like, you need to go spread it. And so in that, he's got these instances where people are telling him, you need to go out there and be the voice of what's happening, right? Expose all of this stuff. And so I think he's a messenger in that sense, in delivering the message of, look at all the atrocities that are happening. Open your eyes. This is not, the Empire's bad kind of thing. I mean, then I think there's another argument to be made, as we talked earlier about him being a messenger of the Force in a way. Right. He's so lucky he gets put in these positions to do certain things. And he's, a messenger or a deliverer of the will of the Force in some ways as well. There's also another example that I thought of, too, when he learns that rebellions are built on hope from the bellhop guy. Right. He actually delivers that message to Jyn Erso later down the road. And then she goes and regurgitates that, and it just it's all around that theme of hope that exists. And so I think my personal opinion is he is a messenger of hope in a lot of different ways. And whether it's, things that he says, the things that he does, the way he interacts with people, the way he inspires people, all of that is a messenger of hope. And then, but there are some examples in there where I felt like it was probably just more of a literal term. So I don't know. Those are my thoughts.
Yeah.
Agree? Disagree?
I mean, yeah, I can see how you get there. They're taking some liberties, I think, but I think, you could argue he's not maybe the messenger. He's
Correct.
one of the messengers.
Many messengers. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think clearly we could probably.
But does that cheapen it for him, though? Does it cheapen the name if he's just one? Like, arguably, everybody that was in Rogue One that died was a messenger, right?
I would almost put him more as the harbinger rather than the messenger of sorts. because it seems like when he shows up, like there's some catalyst that's about to happen. Like
right,
he's the catalyst, right, for some of these things to happen. So I would probably choose a different word besides messenger, harbinger, or catalyst, something like that. He's that point, that person that is maybe not there to light the spark, but often is, and he's definitely the one to kind of see it through towards the end of whatever needs to happen in that given moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he's the one that he's the boots on the ground. But I kind of view harbinger, and maybe it's because I watched Sandman season 2 recently with some of the stuff, and remembering some of that a little bit more. But it feels a little more akin to that maybe than messenger. But I see where your point though. I mean, he is definitely spreading the word in many ways. I think, and not to gospelize this at all, but
So I was just thinking, I was like,
yeah, I mean, and definitely not.
He's an evangelist of sorts.
Yeah, he's definitely not an evangelist, I don't think. And I don't think
he's kind of influence. He's an influencer, and
I don't
gets
think
people to
but when you think about
donate money every week.
You're right. Yeah, you can pass the hat. I think when you think about evangelist, you think someone who's like wanting to do it, and they kind of do it with bravado, and they stand up. And I don't think Cassian does that. He does it in much more localized terms.
Mm-hmm.
To where is that something that's more? Well, I think the messenger. I think someone who is actually bringing it to the masses. And I mean, we could equate this to like holy gospel and things like that with Jesus, and not to equate Andor to Jesus, but we think about messaging, right? And it was very much on the ground, right? It was very rooted in just place to place and spreading the word over time. And you could definitely equate something like that to Andor, but in a much more localized level. I think his name, I don't know, was whispered because again, he was behind the scenes, and the Empire didn't really know who he was either. Right. I mean, they were kind of hunting Luthen in many ways. You could argue Luthen was kind of the messenger in many ways, or he was more the
Nimic.
Maybe was that?
I said Nimic could be argued as a messenger of.
I mean, that would be a more traditional way. I mean, he'd be more of like an apostle, I guess, in some ways, if I'm using these terms correctly. But this is not my forte, so there are others more qualified to do this type of thing. But I don't know. I mean, I think, but harbinger, catalyst, I think for Andor is maybe where I would suit more a little bit than messenger in that case. But
yeah,
I think there's definitely some arguments to be had there.
You touched on this, and we don't need to spend a lot of time because I think I've already said what I needed to say anyways. But I had him listed also as kind of like an atheist. Like he seems adverse to even believing in the Force, especially at the very end there after they speak to the Force healer, and they go back to the room or whatever hotel, no, whatever it was, their pad, and he's like, oh, you made this all up, like you put all this on, and you get the sense that he just does not believe in any of this stuff. I haven't put a lot of thought into it. Maybe at some point we can follow up, but I am interested to understand like why he doesn't believe in the Force. I mean, he's got all these people around him, maybe at least some people around him, and telling him, "May the Force be with you." He hears a lot more in Rogue One than he does during Andor. But there's definitely, the rebellion is kind of built on hope, and it's all that hope is coming from the Force itself. Like there's so many instances that we see from the original trilogy, and so he's in this environment, and yet he seems to be one that is adverse to trying to believe all of that. And I wonder if that's because he had a bad experience. Is he just more like a Han Solo? Like, hey, I've been around this galaxy. I don't know what you're talking about. He himself admits that he's very lucky, and he seems to just be in the right place at the right time. Right, with never acknowledging that maybe there's something there, right? Maybe there is something there when people are talking about the will of the Force and all of that. He gets, and then it's interesting to see that, you talked about him as, he, even though he doesn't believe in the Force, he is one of these people that's out there doing the will of the Force, even if he doesn't feel like he is. And then later on, he gets paired up with like two people from, the Church of Force, essentially, with
right.
Blaze and,
Chirrut. Yeah.
Chirrut, yeah. So it feels like it just keeps coming back to him. And maybe when he's there on Scarif and that bomb's going off, maybe that's the moment where he finally just was like, wow, maybe this is really all about the Force. Maybe I am a believer after all. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there are a couple points in there that you touched on, but I think maybe we could just tease out just a little bit. So I think one is, does he have a belief system? He's had enough bad things happen, losing his sister, the way that his father died, his mother's rebellious spirit at the very end, and you could see where, very much like our own, where people kind of turn their back on God because they believe God has turned, his back on us. And
right.
You spur that because it's easier to not believe in those types of things because that gives you hope and that gives you inspiration. And it also can bring you disappointment if it doesn't work out the way that you want it to, right? So I think that's one angle you could talk about some of that with Cassian. I think the other part though, I think it maybe is more applicable in this is that he doesn't want to view himself as special. And I think as soon as you start to believe that, if you start to believe like what others start to say about you in that way, the ego creeps in, like I'm unique, I'm special. You start to second guess yourself too. And we know Cassian just needs to act. He just needs to act on that instinct, follow what he believes is right, and make it happen. But the second that he believes that he's unique or special or anything like that, it's all going to go away. All the luck will go away. And I think it's easier for him just to think that I'm just like everybody else. I think deep down, he probably knows something is a little bit unique about him and that he's got a unique set of skills and he's able to apply them in very special ways. But you can't allow yourself to go down that egotistical path. And I'm not saying that he would dwell in that at all, but
Yeah.
because I think it introduces doubt as well. And if you feel you're special, then other people start to view that you're special too. And Cassian isn't. We don't ever get the impression that Cassian is out. Well, he was out to kind of make some money, and maybe early on, it was never for fortune and glory, right? To borrow from another franchise, it was, it was always to take care of his own, right, and to do something better, even if it was for bettering himself. That self-interest was absolutely there for for a while. And then it evolved into a different type of self-interest for his people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe not for the galaxy at large, but he got there in some ways.
Yeah.
So I think those are the two factors I would come back to of why he never really got into the Force, just because it's, why would I believe in something that's not really done anything for me?
It's never been there for me. Yeah.
Right. And then the other one is if I believe I'm special, then I'm really not, and everybody thinks they're special. So,
right. That's right out of your book. I mean, you have to tell yourself, look, I just need to be a normal person. Right.
Right. So those are the two kind of camps I fall into.
Yeah. I want to I know Steph's not here, but maybe she is. I want to talk quickly about, Bix and Jin, his relationship with both Bix and Jin. I don't want to lead the witness in any way. I think now that I've had a chance to sit on this whole thing, like when Rogue One, here's where I'm going. When Rogue One came out, I was like, holy crap, there's something there. I still think there is at the very end. When he delivers that speech, after he delivers that speech, she turns around and says, I'm not used to people sticking around when things go bad. And they're kind of circling each other and they're like making eye contact in their heads. And he's kind of like got a little smirk and he's got a little smirk. And you could argue that that's just them, forming a good team or whatever, or finally coming together. But there's something about that little interaction there. And we don't really see more of it, right? I think there is something there that he felt like, well, she's really great and I could see myself with her. Now, knowing that he's still waiting to go with Bix, not so much, right? I feel like he is still loyal to her, and I think that would probably been where he was going to go right afterwards if had this all succeeded like he said he was going to. But the more important conversation here is the fact that he is so inspired by both of these women in a lot of ways, and they're very, very different characters, right? Between Bix and Jin or so. But there is something about both of those characters that really connects to them. And I think they both have, again, we're running out of time, so I don't want to dive into this too much, but it feels like when you look at the characters of Jin, you look at the characteristics of Jin, characteristics of Bix, a lot of what we see are traits of Marva and traits of Clem, And so I think when he sees it, when he's interacting, I think that's why he's so connected with them, why he's willing to be so open and so trustworthy with them. Bix, of course, is a whole nother thing because they've had that long relationship and, there was puppy love and it matured into something more later down the road. And then, they were under duress and living, having to rely on each other just to live literally. And he became very overprotective of her. I mean, it's a whole nother dynamic, but I do like the fact that he was, he gravitated to these really, really strong female characters because of those characteristics that I think we saw from Marva and we saw in some short ways from Clem as well.
Yeah, the idea that they're both willing to sacrifice for family, for sacrifice what's right, that they come from good stock, right? I mean, like you said, I think it's very much what he viewed and valued most about his own parents and what he missed and what he wanted to protect. And I think you see that with them both. And it's okay to be attracted to various people, you know. And again, I think that's where Rogue One, the way that they didn't lean into the relationship side of it or the romantic side of it, is that you can have connection with somebody and it not necessarily be romantic. And you can appreciate that about someone, maybe in a different space, a different time, maybe whatever. But you know, you can kind of just it makes it a little bit messy from a storytelling perspective for us, trying to determine like what does it actually mean. But
Yeah.
but you know, they truly did connect over this. And as again, you go back to like why he didn't, like his mission was to take out Galen Erso, right? And you know, why didn't he? And it was the faith in Jen that she could get what she needed. He was an asset. He could be valuable, but also to not want to take away her father, the way that his parents have been taken away from him. And, you know, in the way that, you know, Bix presumably may have lost, you know, friends and family and stuff along the way too from the Empire. So why do we have to keep giving and taking, and you know, why can't we just do this the right way? And she was willing to fight, and just, I think the way that she went about things in her speech, you know, to him of like, we'll just take the next chance and the next one until they're all gone. And that inspires him as well, because that's generally how he's been living his life the last, you know, 5-6 years, of saying every time I take one, it doesn't seem like it's going to work out, but I've just only one direction. We can only go forward, you know, and we just got to keep chipping away at it and do this for everybody that's come before us, you know, whether it was on Narkina or whether it was back on Ferrix or wherever we've been over these last half dozen years. You know, we owe it to everybody else to keep moving forward. And I think he sees that in both women, that they're willing to sacrifice for the things that they feel are most important and put something above themselves. And that inspires him to be able to do the same.
Yeah, Rob just chimed in and said, I wonder if Jen reminded him of his sister more than an attraction. I'd considered that. I think
we just don't know his sister very well.
We just don't know his sister, and it was so long ago. Like, I mean, there might be characteristics. Like, you know, I know people. I think of like my grandfather, who I didn't really know too well, because he passed, and we didn't get to see him very much. But you know, there's certain things that I really loved about him, even though I didn't really know him per se. And so, do I see that in other people? Yeah, absolutely. I see that in other people to this day. So I think it's possible. I just don't know. We don't know enough about his sister. We don't know how much, you know, what characteristic traits that, they were carrying over into those two ladies as well. So I think it's possible. Let's see. I know we're running out of time, but I want to talk about the speech here, because this is a speech from Rogue One. And when you watch it or hear it, it really is one of the things that changes, or I guess season 1 and season 2 of Andor kind of changed the context of this final speech. In fact, you know, it feels like this speech was kind of the basis of everything that we saw during season 1 and season 2. So I just want to read this, and then I kind of want your thoughts on, you know, what came to mind as you were kind of hearing this. But so this is after Jen goes and pitches the plan to go blow up the Death Star, or steal the plans and get them, right? And they kind of turn her down, like, we're not going to get involved. There's no way we're doing this kind of thing. And he comes up to her, and he starts off by saying, they were never going to believe you. I do. I believe you. We'd like to volunteer. Some of us, most of us, we've all done terrible things on behalf of the rebellion. Spies, saboteurs, assassins. Everything I did for the rebellion. And every time I walked away from something I wanted to forget, I told myself this was a cause that I believed in, a cause that was worth it. Without that, we've lost. Everything we've done, would have been for nothing. I couldn't face myself. If I gave up now, none of us could. And then that's when she says, you know, they walk away and they all agree that they're going to do it. And she says, I'm not used to people sticking around when things go bad. And his response is, welcome home, which is similar to what he says to Naya when he says, you're coming home to yourself. So it feels like this was kind of like that basis. But, you know, you hear like spies, saboteurs, assassins. We've all done terrible things. You think about like some of the stuff that he did, you know, during season 1 and season 2, you know, and then him doing these horrible things and just having to accept that, hey, even though I don't feel great about it, I know that this is the right place to be because it's serving the greater good, right? Again, going back to what we talked about earlier, where I'm trying to save the whole galaxy and not just my group of people, you know, the small band of terrorists that we are aligned with.
But it goes back to like these small moments, I think, is what he kind of keeps referencing to. I love that speech kind of became the whole basis for the show, right? For both season. You pick everything from that speech and just all of a sudden everything applies.
Yeah.
You know, to it. And I think it does bring it full circle though. I mean, it's such a great to go back and hear it after watching the series, because you're right. He has done pretty horrible things, and he did horrible things in Rogue One too, by shooting Tivik in the back. And
Yeah.
it's these sacrifices you have to make because you believe in something bigger than yourself. Although I think there's a little bit of he played a little bit with the words in there, but you definitely felt that kindred spirit. I think that's what he saw in Jen of, I'm willing to do this chance. I think that's when you think about it. This is why the leadership thing is so difficult for me sometimes with Andor, because he's willing to take that chance, and good leaders will take chances even when they know the odds are stacked against you. It just feels like the right thing to do. We have to do this because it's be bold, right? But at the same time, you're also like, I'm going to defy everything I'm kind of telling you is important to me in the same speech. And, I'm going to do this thing because I feel like that's important. But I think that's what Cassian is. I mean, that's kind of just who he is. He goes off. That's why he's special, and I love that part of him continues to come forward, and he's able to help other people kind of realize that too, and bring out what they're special, what makes them special and what gives them great ability, whether it's on an individual level or on a potentially galaxy shifting. Did he think it was going to completely shift the galaxy? I don't know. Maybe, he's kind of taken a chance, but he's also by taking chances is the only way that we're going to move forward. And I think you have to have that realistic aspect of that. And it was really important when you have a character like Cassian and be able to meet up with Jen and say, I see that in you. I see that in us. We're all going to be there right with you. And I love the welcome home line, because again, I'm glad we got that in season 2, just to have that parallel and that connection of he recognizes like this is the place that some people need to be, that you otherwise wouldn't have. He wouldn't be able to do it. And it's almost a reminder to himself, this is where I need to be, because this is where I can be great, but also he's got the flexibility to be even greater when he needs to, at least for his own agenda in some ways.
Yeah, and I know I did not do that speech justice. Like, go back and watch it. It's actually more powerful today than it ever was, even in Rogue One. I thought it was great during Rogue One, but now it really stands out, having the benefit of season 1 and season 2 of Andor. I do want to also say, in that break there, before we get to I'm not used to people sticking around, after he delivers that like incredible speech and all the memories come back, you have K2SO saying, Jen, I'll be there for you. Cassian said I have to, right? He just kind of ruins the moment. So just the bringing that levity to that whole thing and K2SO was really great. I wanted to spend some time talking about K2SO, but the more I think about it, maybe we need to do a revisit of their characters and maybe talk about the comic versus the new interpretation. Not necessarily a character spotlight, but maybe it can be a Patreon show, something fun that we can talk about, because I think there's a lot to talk about with Cassian and K2SO and that relationship and just
do you think
the dynamic.
That's actually one of the more disappointing aspects of the show, where we really didn't get.
Oh, well, I agree. Yeah, I get. They just kind of like, hey, you remember this? Cool. We're moving right along. They're still funny and they still like each other, but we're not going to really get into all that. So,
which I mean, pragmatic. So, I
think it was more about. Well, I was coming from like the writers saying, look, we can't. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this because we got to go, kind of thing.
Well, and again, I mean, you folks like you and me, and then the folks that do these types of shows, right? And we want to find really deep meaning in every little thing. Sometimes you just have a partnership that works, and there's not a lot of depth to it, even though there is a lot of depth to it, but it's not really outward and spoken broadly and spoken brightly. It just kind of exists, and you both settle in, and it's totally comfortable, and it works.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you don't have to dive any further into it than that. And it kind of seems like K2SO and Castian are that kind of pair, where it was a great partnership, but also, and while there's meaning there, neither one will ever really talk about it, even though K2SO probably wouldn't mind talking about it a little bit more, and then probably shut the conversation down with a nod time deal.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. No, it's probably as simple as that. I would agree. I don't think there's anything much there. So let's kind of wrap this up. I guess I got 2 final questions. One I didn't give you on purpose. But the question I did throw out there was just, and this is kind of an LOL question, but not really. Are we going to get any more Cassian Andor? Do we need any more Cassian Andor? It feels like we've visited his whole life. We kind of know where it started, where it ended. I mean, maybe there's a story to be told on, how they got on their original planet and his sister there. Maybe there's something there. I think if they really wanted to go back and revisit the everything that happened in between the 5 years that we saw in season 2. There's probably material there, stories and experiences that start to make more sense, almost similar to what we got with like from a certain point of view books, right? Maybe they do one on Andor specifically. I don't know. But I don't know. It just feels like this.
That would actually be kind of interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they certainly have a lot to talk about in those 5 years, so they could certainly do that. But I say that as, you know, as a fan, somebody that's excited, wants to see more of the character. I do feel like this character is probably put to rest, at least on live action. I mean, Diego Luna he's gotten much older now. He looks very different in Andor season 1, 2 versus what he looks like in Rogue One. That's not going to change. So unless they go the route of special effects or bring in somebody else to play him, I don't know what other stories are to be told here. But do you think this is the end? And, you know, I don't know. How do you feel about that?
For live action, yeah, it's probably the end. I mean, it just makes sense. It just makes sense for even just the reason you explained. And the character's journey is over, so you'd have to go back in the past. Is it the last content we'll get, though? I think the answer is no. I mean, Disney and Marvel and Lucasfilm Publishing have been, like we talked about this Unfiltered, they've been more than happy to drive every other part into the franchise into the ground with some of the comic stories. So it's ripe for doing more of the same, I suppose. But I think with Andor, there are probably some really interesting stories to tell because we glazed over so much in season 2. And arguably that's where there are some really curious stories to tell. So I would think that it's possible that we would, with either a book or maybe even a comic or a miniseries.
And or ongoing series?
Yeah, well.
That fills in the blanks over the last 5 years?
No, I don't want ongoing because the ongoing series are the ones I've had the problem with. I think the ongoing series is where you get into trouble because then you got to fill in at least 20-something issues, if not more than that.
What if they said 50? We'll do 50 issues, but it's going to fill in the gaps between.
Still no. I mean, that's just way too many. Like do what they're doing with like Bad Batch and do a short mini series, right? They did this with some of the High Republic series, and they did arguably a little bit better because you have a really concise story you're telling, and it's more of an arc. Treat it more like an episodic arc, like you did with the show, right? So you get 4 or 5 issues, and you kind of tell a moment in time. I think that's where the Andor, it worked in season 2. It had its challenges and it left us wanting more, but it worked for what they kind of needed to do to highlight a certain important event. And you could do some of that again with the comic books, I think, with Andor. I think that would be interesting to see, to keep that alive, or even just a book that takes a snapshot in time within one of those years and something else that was important that you didn't otherwise get to hear. But it's such dangerous territory of watering it down, which has been my larger issue with things. So
yeah.
I think if we're going to get something that's going to be more in that realm, unfortunately, if they were going to do something, I wish they would tell us like right now, hey, we got this in the works. We're going to do it, because sometimes what we've seen with like some of the Acolyte books is they kind of announce them a little too late. Then they finally come out way too late. And now there's a robust part of the fandom that's excited about it. But unfortunately, I think those books probably won't do very well because everyone has moved on and there's nothing else coming. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, that's the habit that we have is, well, I guess that's probably just a behavior of TV watchers in general. If you don't have something new to look forward to, why do I want to continue to invest in it? And I think that's some of it. And that's where the books and the comics they have a little more leeway in that regard. So maybe you can do a little bit more there. But I don't want an ongoing series because I think they would just absolutely
milk it.
It would just be, I don't think it would be good. And I think it would really sour kind of what Tony Gilroy and company have done, unless he's the one penning it. I mean, that'd be a little bit different, That
would be different.
But my confidence is very shaken in what we can do, especially in the comics area right now.
Yeah, yeah. I like the idea of a comic series, or like you said, like one of those little, anthology books that kind of, from a certain point of view, but Andor edition, that'd be kind of neat to see.
And Andor, a certain point of view, would be very interesting. How many stories you could pick up from that, because it is somewhat localized on these characters, and you've kind of already done it to an extent. So that would be an interesting one to do.
Yeah.
But I'd love a deeper dive on Luthen and Clea, like some of the things they did, growing up, expand some of those adventures. I mean, and then with Cassian, you kind of have any period of time to kind of choose from. Maybe less so his childhood, but there's some key moments you could do flashbacks. I think it would be great to help fill in some of those gaps too.
Like, what if we had one of the stories out of that anthology, about him and his sister on that planet? Some backstory of, them venturing out into the woods and doing whatever. I mean, whatever it is, right? That's why those books are so popular and so successful, is because it's just you get to tell this little story in 20 pages that probably doesn't mean anything to the general audiences, but for people like us, like we eat that stuff up. It'd be really cool just to get that perspective and see those certain points of view.
Right. Yeah.
This is a really quick question, I promise. I was thinking about this, and we talked a little bit about it from time to time on the show, but we didn't really spend too much time on it. It's whether or not the show is called Andor. Did you ever feel like at any point Andor was taking a backseat to some of the other characters or some of the other events? And we saw that with the Book of Boba Fett. And why does it feel different? It feels different for me, but why does it feel different for you, if so?
Man, that's a tough question. Because, well, I think when we read some of the early reviews of the show, of season 2, it was very much like the show is really, really good, but it doesn't feel like it's really Andor centric.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really hard to argue that that's not an accurate statement, because I think
Right. No, I agree. I absolutely agree.
This is a total ensemble show,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it excels because of it. But I think you kind of still need to, they do well enough, I think, to still kind of circle around a central character. Now, you could argue whether that's, and season 2 did a good job of moving that off of Luthen. I think when you look at season 1, you could argue that Luthen's kind of that figure everyone's trying to get close and get to. But by season 2, everything starts to be a little bit more spread out. But Cassian is the one that kind of links them all together. Now,
Right.
and in almost reality, that's exactly what's happening, because Luthen's on the outs with everybody else. And so by the time you get to just 2 or 3 years away from from the Death Star and A New Hope and Rogue One, is really Andor that's the one that's kind of bringing them all together. So I think from that respect, the show is still very accurate. And to your point before, around having a central character and one that represents another part of our audience, I think that was also important to have, and it made sense to do it. So it was like an obvious choice.
Yeah.
And again, you have something to kind of bring people in. You weren't going to name this like Birth of the Rebellion or something like that necessarily. Like, short, succinct, to the point, central character. And, we kind of get there to that point with Andor. But there's definitely a case to say that this is not an Andor-centric story. We're not seeing his complete journey by any stretch, and that the ensemble is definitely better than any individual, because we didn't spend every waking moment of how many hours of television do we get across these 2 seasons with, with Cassian Andor.
Yeah.
And I think we're better off for that. I think it told a much better story because of that.
Yeah, and I agree 100%. Like I definitely see the argument. I think there were moments there where I'm watching and I'm thinking, wow, this is an incredible moment, and Andor is nowhere to be found, or he has a small role in this. I mean, it all ties back to Andor, and I guess from that perspective, that standpoint, yes, it's probably aptly named Andor. But the reason I don't care is because it's so good. I mean, you want to know more about Mon Mothma. You want to know more about Luthen. You want to know more about what's happening with the rebellion, and what's happening with the ISB and the inner workings that are going on there. Cyril Karn and Didramiro. I mean, Edie, like all these characters are so interesting. They're so intriguing. You do want to watch more of it. And I think that's why it gets a pass. I think if this had been like a really poorly written show, that could have been a disaster. And I think people would be jumping all over this and saying, this is terrible. Why is it even called Andor? He's not even part of it. But that's not the case. Yeah, right? It turned out to be spectacular. It became a truly ensemble cast. You got a lot of characters that stood out, got a lot of spotlight, a lot of much deserved attention, and you had great performances and great writing and great directing and great cinematography. Yeah, it gets a free pass. Like I don't really care. Like I'll be fine if they gave me another series like this that just they focus on one character and it's good content. It always gets a free ride. Nobody really cares at the end of the day. So I can see the argument, but it's just too good to really try to fight on a die on that hill.
And I would have given people more, like they would have had a more valid argument, I think, if it wouldn't have come back by the second half of season 2, if it hadn't come back and started to really become more that Andor is the central point. He is the hub. If evolution didn't happen and everybody was truly in their own camp and they were working against each other inadvertently and no coordination whatsoever, if there was no way to get information between all of these different parties and this tension and be able to resolve that, I think they would have been absolutely right. Like this would have fallen apart. I think to your point, maybe the free pass comment is maybe one that's it might stoke people a little bit, but it's more about like, no, they did bring them all together in a way, and it was Andor in a way to be able to do that even though each one was vital in its own way. And Andor wasn't a superhuman being, because if Andor was a superhuman being, we would have been like, well, he's more important than Luke Skywalker. He's more important than, and then people would have had an issue with that too. And I think, no, he's a central character that's important to all of these activities going on. He bridges it. But much to what we just talked about before, of Andor doesn't view himself in that way.
Yeah.
We shouldn't view the show in that way, that Andor is the only character that was able to move anything forward, and should have been the only main character, because he's the titular character. And I think we've proven that you can have a great titular character, and you can have a great cast around him, and you can just weave them all together in some magical way, and you get this amazing piece of art that we got with this series.
And speaking of cast members and helping us build this amazing piece of art, how about some shout outs to the people that joined us in the live
Wow,
stream?
you are taking some liberties with
Man, I'm telling you, I
art.
was struggling. I was like, where am I going with this? But go on, please.
That was a challenge. Yeah, huge thanks to all of our Patreon members who support us each and every week. We certainly appreciate that. CantinaCast.com/Patreon if you'd like to come out and join us. Lots of content out there in the backlog. Of course, we're always working on something new for y'all as well. Huge thanks to everyone who came out in the live stream. CantinaCast.com/YouTube. If you're listening to this, thanks for the download. Please come out and be one of these amazing people. Qui-Gon Jay, One versus CPU, Alex, my Star Wars guys. A number of you in the background that did not say hello tonight. We hope you'll feel comfortable and say hello next time. CantinaCast.com/YouTube. We'd love to have you out here. There we go.
Yeah, just say hi. You don't. We don't engage you. Just say hi. That's all we ask.
That's not true. Albert will point you out and make a scene.
They're like, whoa, who's that? They've never been here before.
Stop the press. Who's that?
Okay, I think we already plugged. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. We already plugged all of the stuff, but just a reminder, we've got the Rebuild the Galaxy stories coming up here soon, and I don't know, a slew of stuff that Jonesy's already mapped out. So, but we're back again, so we've got more Patreon and more regular content coming out very soon. Jonesy, any final words, thoughts, opinions, anything before we get out of here, as I'm trying to find the button?
No, we're gonna miss you, Andor. I mean, it's been a long ride, long journey. So sad to see you go, but excited for all the new things coming our way, and hopefully we'll be able to revisit some of the stuff in either a year from now or in maybe other smaller pieces of content we'll be singing its praises, just like we have here. Hopefully. Yeah,
me too. I hope we do get more content, and yeah, if we don't see you before then, before next year on the 1-year anniversary show. Thanks so much for joining, and we'll see you on the next episode.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property, and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.